Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cloud Migration 101, brought to you by Cloud Carib. My name is Jeff Stofa. I am the sales executive for Guyana and also for other countries here in the Caribbean. I'm joined by my colleague, Sandy Bowen, who you can see there. She's based out of Georgetown. She handles sales operations for us in Guyana. If her name seems familiar to you, it's probably because she used to work for the Guyana Chamber of Commerce, and now we're very happy to have her with us. She helps coordinate meetings between Guyanese organizations and Cloud Carib that are interested in cloud migration. Our expert today is Mark Arruda. He's our VP of Solutions. I'm going to let Sandy talk about his background when she begins the questions. There's Mark. Welcome, Mark. But what I'd like to start with is to explain to everyone the idea for this webinar and how Sandy and I came up with it. As we were meeting with different organizations in Guyana, we found that the same questions were coming up over and over, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could collect the most commonly asked questions about cloud migration, pose them to a real expert like Mark, in a forum that would benefit a lot of people, not just these particular organizations we were meeting with one by one. And that's the whole basis for this webinar and what we're going to do today. I'd like to also give you a little background on Cloud Carib and who we are. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary last month. We are based in the Bahamas. We are a cloud services provider and a managed services provider. Now, what does that mean? As far as cloud services, you can use us to do a complete cloud migration, move your infrastructure, move your servers to our platform. You can, if you're not ready for that just yet, maybe you just want to back up your infrastructure onto our platform, have a disaster recovery plan if you're worried about fire, you're worried about flood. Maybe you're in an area of the hurricane if you're farther up in the Caribbean. So we have this kind of a platform, the same kind of a platform that Amazon offers or Google, IBM, or Oracle, with the difference being that because we are a Bahamian company and our servers are Bahamian, we do not share the data on your servers with the United States government like the United States government, the United States companies do. Let's talk about managed services. Our managed services offering has to do with the fact that we have up to 100 engineers, an army of engineers that will maintain your infrastructure on our platform. Maintenance, if the servers have an issue, licensing is always included, but if you want extra service on your infrastructure, we can help you with everything from patching to 100 different levels of security. We have SLAs promising no data loss, which is something that the big companies don't offer. So basically, we offer a network of data centers all around the Caribbean. We offer these services to Caribbean organizations. We focus on the Caribbean, and then we offer managed services. And we're very proud that we were voted number 28 by Channel Futures 2 months ago. That was number 28 out of 501 worldwide managed service providers. That makes us number 1 in the Caribbean. So that's a little background on Cloud Carib. If you want to learn more, you can always contact me after the webinar, but we really want to get started with the questions. So I'd like to do a little bit of our housekeeping. This is an interactive webinar. We want you to take part in the chat, the questions and answers, and there's also going to be polling. So if you just want to chat with the whole group or you want to chat with individual people, you can do that. If you want to send questions and answers to the panelists, if we have time, we will ask Mark these questions, and then we're going to have some polls that pop up. Please give us your opinion. And with that, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Sandy, because she's ready with the questions for Mark. Take it away, Sandy.
For that intro, Jeff, solutions at Cloud Carib. Mark has over 20 years of global technology leadership experience, and he has worked with startups and multinational corporations in almost every continent from North America to the Middle East and Asia. He has led sales and solutions portfolios Huawei, Logic, and Misa. So Mark brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to this conversation. Mark, you're someone at Cloud Carib who is really good at explaining concepts surrounding cloud migration in an easy to understand way for both IT and non-IT persons. So Jeff and I are really happy to have you here today to go with us. Okay, so begin with the first question. What is the cloud?
That's a good question. So the cloud can be many things, but essentially the cloud is a collection of resources, things that we're all familiar with: servers, storage, networking. But it's also, in my mind, it's also a collection of people and experts that help you run your business in the cloud. So there's infrastructure providers like the big guys that Jeff mentioned, Amazon, Azure, and Google. They're good companies, but really they're focused on infrastructure. So they give you the resources, but they don't give you the expertise that goes along with that. Really, the cloud is a way for you to essentially focus on the growth of your business and not focus on the servers and the essential parts of the business that maybe don't make sense for you to focus on in terms of a resource allocation perspective. But really, at the end of the day, the cloud is a way for you to ensure that you can get work done, but also leverage expertise, in my mind. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of servers that someone else owns. That's a very simple explanation, but it's not a mystery. It shouldn't be made out to be a mystery. The cloud is something that should be accessible to everybody, and that's our goal, to always make it accessible and easy to understand, and not a scary thing for anyone to start using.
Thank you. And what are some of the benefits of moving to the cloud?
So some of the benefits you get are, in my mind, I see a lot of our customers, they benefit from, first of all, scale. So it's very hard in a growing economy or any growing company to meet demand for resources, whether that's constantly growing storage or application you need to launch. So traditionally, if you wanted to, let's say, launch a new application, you need to buy servers and storage, all those traditional components, wait for them to arrive, rack them, stack them, configure them. It could take weeks or months. Whereas, with a cloud provider, and when I know this because we've done this in the real world, not just in theory, but we've taken a customer's requirement for infrastructure and turned it around in a matter of days versus, again, weeks or months. So that's a big benefit. Another benefit is the inherent security that comes with it, because any reputable cloud provider, including ourselves, ensures that infrastructure is in a secured facility with things like biometrics and security people and systems and monitoring. It just takes it to that next level so that you know that your data is safe and secure and always accessible. So most cloud providers, again, any good ones, including us, ensure that that data and that connectivity is best in class, so that there's never a question of, can I get to my data when I need to get to my data?
Okay, so for the next question, Mark, can you tell us what exactly happens in a cloud migration? People often want to know what the process is, how long it takes, and will they need to hire new staff to migrate to the cloud?
Good question. So I'll answer your last question first. You don't need to hire new staff to migrate to the cloud. One of the reasons that we exist as a managed services provider, and I'll emphasize managed and service, is that we provide that expertise. And what that means is we work with your existing team, whoever that may be, to ensure that ensure that your needs are met. And that means things like sitting with your team, showing them how things are going to work, and then really planning everything out. So before we do anything, we plan, right? Typically, we spend more time on planning than we do on actually the activities that go into migrations. So that means what we do is we build, if you have an environment with 15 servers of different flavors of Windows, Linux, whatever it may be, we'll look at that environment. We will ensure that we build a like for like environment in our cloud, migrate data, test everything, and at the same time ensure that nothing is impacting your current infrastructure. So with that, what we always try to do is maintain two systems at once. So your original systems are still online, they're still running, they're still servicing your customers while you're testing your cloud environment in the background with us. And only when you're 100% confident do we essentially flip a switch so that now your customers and your employees are using the new system. If we do it right, and we do it right often, your employees don't know that anything's happened and your customers don't know anything's happened. And that's the sign of success for us, is to ensure that basically no one knows anything happened.
Mark, can I just interject that in our contracts, we bake into them that a typical migration should only take 5 days. Because we sometimes speak to people that think it's going to take months, that they're going to have to hire extra people, that there's a whole lot of planning, and then they're very surprised that when we actually do the migration, it happens that fast. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, 5 business days is typical. There could be longer, it could be shorter. We've done implementations for customers literally in hours. For existing customers that we have everything in place, we just add, VMs. Sometimes it's just a matter of adding something like some more RAM or more CPU or more disk, which is very hard to do when you're running your own infrastructure, because if you need to add more CPU or disk or memory, you need to go out and buy that and then do it and wait for it to arrive. Whereas with us, we can just scale it up as needed because we've made those investments, so you don't have to. Or with a new customer, 5 days is fairly typical, depending on the resource allocation that we can get from the customer. And what I mean by that is, the customer's main objective is to stay in business, to keep business running properly. So we work on their schedule. If they're ready to go and everyone's all hands on deck, 5 business days for most environments is something that's doable. The reason for that is that if you tell us you need 15 servers and 600 gigs of RAM and 10 terabytes of storage, we don't run to the store and buy it. We already have that in place. So we just start building for you. We're not waiting for resources to arrive in most cases. We're able to execute immediately.
So what I'm hearing from you, Mark, basically is that when there is a customer that's interested in cloud migration, what we do is we go down there and we plan and talk to them about what they actually want to move to the cloud, replicate it without affecting their infrastructure. We do it for them. They don't have to get involved unless there's some kind of proprietary software or something they have to explain to us. And then at the end, we show them how to access it using their ISP. And this can be done within 5 days, correct?
That's typically correct, yes.
Perfect. Okay, just wanted to make. Okay, thank you. Okay, Sandy, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mark. That's good to know. The next question, how do businesses access the cloud after they migrate their servers? Specifically, how long will their IT teams take to learn how to access their servers once they're on the cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the most part, the tools used by the IT staff are the same ones they use today. So for example, if they're using Windows servers and they need to access those servers remotely, whether it's on-premise in their office or their data center or in our cloud, they would still use something like RDP, remote desktop. If it's Linux, they might use something like SSH or a command line tool. So it's very similar to the way they do it today. The goal is to not place a large training burden on the existing IT staff. They will learn some things by inherent in what we do is we teach the team, the client team, how to use the cloud. But the reality is, and again, I said it earlier, this shouldn't be something that's scary or mysterious. You're using the same tools you use today. So you use Windows, you use RDP, you use Linux, you use things like SSH or command line tools. On top of that, we do have a cloud portal that if you choose to manage your own cloud infrastructure, which again is something that we facilitate for our clients, some clients have IT staff that are very capable, and they're the ones that are going to manage the environment regardless of where that environment sits. If it's in our cloud, you can still say, essentially here are the keys, and you run the environment, although it's in our infrastructure. So the client in that case would have access to our web portal, and in that web portal, they would see all of their servers, and they could essentially click on whichever server they need to manage, and again, log in using RDP to manage that server, or SSH if it's Linux. But on top of that, we also provide 24/7, 365 support when that client does need assistance. And that's real life support. That's not a phone queue where you're pressing buttons for half an hour to get to a real person. We have real live people in the Caribbean, staffed up, ready to assist you 24/7, 365. But for the most part, it's really a self-managing platform.
Mark, we had a question from the group about, or do we partner with a SOC? Do we have a SOC? So maybe this is a good time for you to talk about our command and control center.
Yeah, great. I just mentioned that with our 365 support. So we have what we call our C3 command and control center, and that is a 24/7, 365, fully staffed, essentially engineering crew that is there. You can either open a ticket through our web portal, you can call a phone number to talk to a live person, or you can email. In any event, any interaction that you initiate with us is tracked so that you can see the progress. And tied to that is what we call an SLA, a service level agreement, meaning that when you make contact with us in our SLA, if I'm remembering correctly, we have 15 minutes to respond to you initially to say, look, we've acknowledged the issue and we're actively looking at it. And from there, you can watch the entire escalation path. And the escalation path at our company includes going right up to CEO as necessary. And I should say the C3 is a SOC and a NOC. It's essentially an overall operations center backed up by our engineers and architects that are always on call, again, 24/7. But there's an actual live administrator who can likely fix 90% of the problems you may encounter in the first call.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Now here's a question about security, which is a common concern.
Yes.
Someone is asking, isn't being in the cloud making infrastructure more vulnerable to security attacks such as ransomware? And is being on-premise safer?
That's also a good question. And I would say, essentially, the answer is it depends. But generally speaking, if you have servers that are connected to the internet, whether it's in your office or in the cloud, you need to secure that server. You need to secure that data. So where that data is located, cloud or on-premise, isn't as important as is that data accessible. So if I have a mail server, if I'm running my own Exchange server in my office or a file server, and I have the ability to access it outside of that office, then you can be vulnerable. Or I'll take it a step further. If you have servers in your office that are not connected to the internet, but someone happens to bring in a USB key or gets an email and clicks on that email and it has malicious malware built into it, you can get ransomware just as easily. And the reality is most companies, and this is worldwide, not just in any particular area or place, don't have the resources to have full-time IT staff that are just around security, just around vulnerability scanning, just around backups, just around replication, just around monitoring 24/7, 365. They just don't have that resource, regardless of the size of the company, because they want to use their limited resources to build a business, not to build an IT team. So we've done that essentially on our clients' behalf. But as a standard practice, we have, again, our SOC, our C3, which is also our SOC, is monitoring that infrastructure all day, every day, with advanced networking tools, advanced security tools. And we look at multiple layers of protection when we're doing that. And in terms of ransomware, I'll just say that the best defense against ransomware is to have a very good backup strategy, because if you get ransomware today and you can back up from yesterday or 2 days ago, what that hacker has is not very valuable, because you can replace that. You can fix your systems and replace that data very quickly. So backups are an important part of security. It's sort of, I think it's a fundamental issue with security, is being able to have good data to go back to. But to go back to the beginning, the cloud is not inherently secure or insecure, in my opinion. It depends on who's using it and how they're managing it. So you can't just go to someone like an Azure or an AWS, move to the cloud, and then wash your hands of it. It's not a magic bullet. And that's why I think we excel with our customers, because we are a managed services provider. We provide that expertise. Whereas if you move to the cloud in one of the large, let's say, hyperscale providers, you don't get any assistance with that kind of thing. You're on your own, essentially.
I just want to jump in, Sandy, real quick. That's interesting because I think we talk to a lot of organizations that feel that way. They feel that as long as my servers are on premise, they're safe. If I put them to the cloud, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to be better connection, maybe, or you know, but um, then they're going to be vulnerable to ransomware. They're going to be vulnerable to other kinds of attacks. So I think it's good that you made that clear. Also, what I find is the same people that say that will then tell me stories about fires or a lot of employee error or things spontaneously combusting and catching on fire, that kind of thing. So sometimes I think people fear ransomware or fear the attacks they read about in the newspaper or online all the time. But then there's a lot of things going wrong that aren't that sophisticated, just a fire or a flood or some kind of a situation like that. I've heard a lot of stories.
It's very true.
On that.
It's very true. And again, it's because most companies aren't built to be IT companies. And I'll give you an example. I did an assessment for a large Canadian university a few years ago, and they had a tour of the campus, and they had essentially closets that housed mops and brooms and water, also had servers and switches in them. So that was a big no-no. And the same university had a very robust UPS and generator platform built to run all of their critical infrastructure, except for the AC in the server room. So the servers would continue to run in case of a power outage, but there was no AC to cool those servers. So what happened was the servers would overheat and shut down. So you haven't eliminated the problem that you were trying to solve. That's one example. And another example, sometimes people think, well, I don't have the money or the budget or the staff to do all this security stuff. And the reality is it doesn't come down to money or budget, it's just time. And the example I like to give is a large company in North America called Equifax. People may or may not have heard of this company.
Yes.
They are a credit rating agency. They tell you if you are able to get a mortgage or a credit card or a car loan. And they were hacked a few years back. And it wasn't anything sophisticated. It wasn't a big ransomware where they had to social engineer something. Literally, and they have an IT staff and they have billions of dollars. But what happened was they had a 3-year-old SQL server that hadn't been patched, or a 3-year vulnerability that was exploited because they just didn't get around to it. And that's the story you see over and over again because the IT staff get busy. They need to do 1,000,001 things. And if you drop one thing, 3 years later, you forgot about it. And that's how it happened. It wasn't sophisticated. It wasn't negligence in terms of anything malicious. They just didn't get to it. And that led to a 3-year-old exploit. Another thing I'd like to say is people sometimes think there's a hacker waiting behind a door to hack you if you make a mistake. But the reality is a lot of these hacks are done by bots. They're just running, on the internet. They've been running for years. And as soon as they're just scanning everything. As soon as they see an IP address with the vulnerability, they pounce. And we've actually tested this at Cloud Carib. We put up a Windows server, just right out of the box, put the CD in essentially, build a brand new Windows server, put it on the internet, took a coffee break, and within 15 to 20 minutes, it had been ransomware. And we did it on purpose to see how long it would take. There was no data there. We weren't vulnerable at all, but that's how long it takes. And that wasn't somebody just waiting for us to make a mistake. That was just one of millions of bots running around the internet, always scanning for vulnerabilities. They're scanning ports and they're scanning IPs. So it's not a matter of, someone waiting in the wings. It's just something that's automated.
Great. Sandy, before we go on to the next question, I want to remind everyone we have some polling on the right-hand side. So click on that little triangle for polling. Please partake. We have questions and answers, and we have a chat. Also, before the next question, Mark, we have a question from the group that says, what is the biggest cloud migration mistake you have seen, and how do clients avoid it?
Good question. So the biggest mistake that I've seen is that people, they tend to underestimate so from our perspective, because we've done it, it's not very fair because we've done it a million times, you know what to expect. But from a client perspective, they tend to underestimate the time. Although it's a short time window, it's the intensity of work that has to be done. So they need to make sure that and a lot of times companies might have 1 or 2 IT people. So that person has to be dedicated for a fair amount of time to work with us to get the data needed to do a proper migration. Another thing that happens sometimes is that and that can be, thankfully we've done this enough that we've learned from our mistakes and our other experiences. but we need to be very well defined in who does what and what you're getting. So sometimes the customer might think they're getting A and they're getting B. And the expectations are very important to be set at the beginning. So it's not always a technical mistake. It's just a matter of what am I doing and what are you doing, so that everyone's on the same page, and to understand that we're all working towards the same goal.
Perfect. Thank you. Sandy, back to you.
Okay. So bandwidth is a challenge in Guyana as well as other parts of the Caribbean. So when Jeff and I talk to people, they often ask, how does the cloud affect bandwidth? For example, does it improve it?
Yes.
So that's a good question. So I'll give you an example, and this is not going to be in every scenario, but if you have customers, let's take Guyana, for example, it could be anywhere. If you have customers in Guyana, but also outside of Guyana, and your data is all in your office, for example, and your office has a power outage or there's an issue with the servers, then not only are the people in Guyana not able to access the data, but no one else is either. And let's say, and I lived in the Bahamas for many years, and we've had issues at times where the internet might be down island wide for a fair amount of time. That's residential internet. And one of the benefits for us is we have everything in our data centers, which has multiple internet providers. So if one provider goes down, the other takes over, and it's a seamless experience. But as a local user, you may not be able to access that data. But if you have clients outside of that region, they can access the data because they're not depending on your office's internet access. And again, it could just be that your office lost internet access. And why would you want to impact customers that don't have that issue? You could be someone in the office next door that's your client and can't access your infrastructure because you have an issue. So this tends to avoid that because, again, in the data center, if you've done it right, you have multiple internet providers that are working seamlessly to provide an experience that is better than what you can typically get on your own. It also means that you have just more accessibility. But again, if you're an office that has an internet connection go down and your data is in the cloud, you can use things like hotspotting a cell phone or going to your home to use an internet connection there. So it's not, the internet in your office is no longer that central point of failure. It's sort of dispersed. And again, it's still in our data center, but we've built in resiliency, whereas most clients may not have done that, again, because it's not affordable or feasible to do that.
But again, Mark, just to kind of focus on what we can't do, I think that I speak to a lot of people that think that if they go to the cloud with us, that they're going to have a different ISP from the one that's already available in their country. In other words, well, one good thing about going to the cloud is we won't have to deal with our ISP that's so slow. So or they think sometimes that if there's no ISP connection because there's some kind of a natural disaster, they will have an ISP connection with us because they're in the cloud. So sometimes you have to kind of make clear what we can't do. We can do some things and we can't do other things.
Yeah, we're not an ISP, of course, and we are reliant, or at least our clients in Guyana in this case, would be reliant on the ISP on the island, or if there's more than one than those ISPs. But again, we can't resolve that issue. But again, if you're in a data center that has multiple connections, we can ensure that whoever does have internet, wherever they are in the world, can access that infrastructure.
Correct. Great. Okay, Sandy, back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Now, can you tell us what is the relation between the U.S. government and the big cloud providers such as Amazon and AWS?
Good question. So, I mean, Amazon, AWS, which is Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud, all those big players you think of, they're all U.S. entities, so meaning U.S. domiciled companies. So let's say, for example, someone wants to use AWS and they want to put their data in Ireland or Singapore, anywhere that Amazon has infrastructure. They may think, well, that's not in the US. And technically it's not. From a data perspective, your data isn't in the US, but from a legal perspective, any government entity in the US can, through what they call the Cloud Act, can request that data from Amazon. And if they want to go one step further, they can use what's called the Fisa Warrant. The Fisa Warrant tells Amazon or any company we want that data from your customer, and you also cannot tell your customer. Whereas the Cloud Act, Amazon would say, Mr. Customer, the government has asked me to give them your data. I'm just letting you know. A Fisa warrant, they don't have to tell you anything at all. And we're not, and the point of that is that we are not part of that system because we're not a US-based entity.
And just to make clear, Mark, because sometimes when we talk to people about data sovereignty in the United States government and FISA and the US Cloud Act, they think that that's only for servers that are in the United States. But this is for servers that are in Guyana, in Jamaica, in Barbados, in England, no matter, it's because that they are owned by US companies. So it's based on who owns the server, not where the server is, correct?
Yeah, as I said in the beginning, that's exactly correct. Because Amazon's a US company, you might have data with them in Ireland, but that's still considered a US company. So the US government can still tell Amazon, we want the data of company X, and Amazon doesn't really care where that data is in the world. They're going to give it to the government.
Okay, Mark, we have a question from the group. Using Amazon Cloud, I'm not seeing any pricing information on the website for a cost estimate. I can answer that. I remember Jeff saying in our earlier conversations that you are using VMware Cloud. So we do want to talk about VMware and maybe Veeam and how we are partnered with them.
You broke up there for a second, Jeff, but do they want to know about pricing?
Well, we are using Amazon Cloud. We're not seeing any pricing information on the website for us. So I can answer that.
Yeah.
If you're interested in any pricing, you would talk to me. We do customized pricing for all our clients. I'll get you an actual quote. I'll have you meet with an engineer. But he also said, I recall that you use VMware for your cloud. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we use what's called VMware vCloud Director, and that is essentially their multi-tenant cloud platform. So because we don't want to be associated with the US in terms of using a US company, when we talk about our cloud, we really mean our cloud. So we've built our own infrastructure on VMware vCloud Director that facilitates the ability to provide clients with virtual servers, just like on Amazon or Azure or GCP, Google, but on our own infrastructure. The only difference is the interface. So with AWS, you have an interface, you log in, you get your servers. Same with us, it's just an interface that's powered by VMware versus powered by Amazon or Azure. But the reality is that interface that connects with our VMware-based infrastructure versus any other cloud. So we aren't just a reseller of Amazon or Azure. That would be pointless in our case. We put the investment into our own cloud infrastructure using VMware.
The same person said they're interested in managed cloud services, which include intrusion detection monitoring. Can you do intrusion detection and how the C3 handles that?
100%. So so one of the things about Cloud Carib is we're vendor agnostic, meaning we can manage and maintain a variety of different platforms. We're not Microsoft, we're not Amazon, we're not IBM, we're not pushing any product per se, but we do have our strengths, and one of our strengths is in what's a platform called Palo Alto. And Palo Alto Networks we consider an excellent unified threat management platform that includes firewalls. It also, and one of the reasons we like it is because it includes a very, very good IPS platform, intrusion prevention platform. And all of that is monitored through, we've made large investments in what Palo Alto calls Panorama. So Panorama is a centralized management platform for their firewalls and their threat management devices. And again, that's part of what the C3, our command and control center, does 24/7, 365. They're in our C3 essentially secured area. And if you ever get to see it, it's a room with many, many screens and many, many tools. One of those tools being Panorama, and that's monitoring customers' firewalls and IPS and antivirus all at the same time. So in terms of IPS for Palo Alto, we would be monitoring your specific firewall. And in this case, it's a virtual Palo Alto firewall running on our VMware infrastructure. And we would monitor that for you, again, 24/7, 365. And one of the things I like about Palo Alto is that they have what they call Wildfire. And Wildfire is a global So Palo Alto has their own SOC around the world, multiple ones. And let's say, for example, there is a new ransomware or new virus in the wild in Asia. Once that's detected in Asia, before you're awake, essentially in Guyana or in the Bahamas, all of the systems worldwide have been updated to protect against that vulnerability. So that happens in real time. You don't have to wait and download a signature like you do with the traditional antivirus. It's done proactively to ensure we have the very latest coverage in terms of protection.
By the way, Mark, I think you made a very good point, Mark and Sandy, that I always try to bring up to people is that we are vendor agnostic. We like Palo Alto. We also sell Fortinet. We have Fortinet on our platform. We have a lot of different kinds of equipment. We also do managed services for on-premise and also if you already have Amazon Cloud and you need work on your infrastructure on Amazon Cloud, our engineers can still help you. It's not that they are restricted just to our own cloud. We can help you on premise. We can help you on a different cloud. We can help you on our own cloud. Correct, Mark?
That's a very good point. That was my next point. Thank you. So yeah, we do that as well. We have customers who are looking for, let's say, a new platform for security, and we can, again, you said do Fortinet, we can do Cisco, we love Palo Alto, whatever it may be, we can do that on premise in your environment, because what happens is, let's say, for example, we deploy a physical Palo Alto into your environment, we connect that back to our Panorama tool I mentioned earlier, and then monitor that 24/7, just as we would if you were a cloud provider client in one of our data centers. So we're not limited. So basically we go to the edge of your network, right? So we're not limited to just the data center.
Great. Okay, Sandy, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mark and Jeff. Here's a follow-up question. How is Cloud Carib different from other large cloud providers such as Google, Amazon, IBM, and Oracle?
It's a good question. So we're better. That's the answer. We're just better. But in seriousness, so AWS, Azure, Google, they provide infrastructure. I think I mentioned it earlier. They provide servers and storage and computing, just as we do. But that's where they end, and that's where we start. So what that means is we can provide the same servers you need, just like Google and those big guys do, on our VMware platform. But what we do is, what they don't do is they don't assist you in the migration. So the planning, the sitting down with you like we're doing now, sitting, talking one-on-one to understand your business and what needs to happen to get you from A to B. They don't do anything around training to show you how to use the tools. They might have you watch a YouTube video, but there's really no one to talk to understand. And there's no support for things like, you may decide, I have an IT staff that's highly skilled, and we want them to focus on the big things. We want you guys, i.e. Cloud Carib, to do things like take care of my patching. So every Tuesday when Microsoft releases, or every Tuesday of the month, Microsoft releases new patches, I want Cloud Carib to do that on my off hours, on my schedule, while I worry about the business and maybe my IT guys rolling out a new platform for me or doing something of much higher value. The big guys they don't design the solution for you. They just give you the resources and they walk away. And if you do manage to move to their platforms, you then need to consider how you're going to secure that data. Again, we talked about you can't just put stuff in the cloud and it's suddenly protected. So how do you secure it? How do you protect it from data loss? So if you're thinking of things like backups, replication, all those things have to come into play, regardless of whether you're on premise or in the cloud. Those things don't go away because you're in the cloud, and some people think they do. So really, in a nutshell, Cloud Carib as a managed service provider, as opposed to just an infrastructure provider, we help our customers migrate their environment in a very efficient way, and then we ensure your environment is safe and secure and runs as it should.
Mark, someone just asked a question that I think piggybacks on what you just said. They're interested to know what exactly does the managed services team? I know that we definitely will do licenses and maintenance. If there's any issues with the servers on our cloud, that's our responsibility, not theirs. They pay a monthly fee. I want to make everyone clear about that. So you would have a setup fee, and then you would have a monthly fee, and we're responsible for the maintenance and the health of the servers. That's our cost, and also for the licensing. However, talk to us about the extras they can get, patching, updates, security, things like that.
Yeah, so I like to refer to it sometimes to the mechanics of the IT world because no one likes doing patching. No one wants to be up at 3 in the morning on a Friday night or a Saturday morning doing that. So they say, Cloud Carib, can you do that for us? Because my guys need to focus on rolling out a new, we have 100 new laptops to roll out, or we need to upgrade all of our servers that are, again, even if your servers are in the cloud, if you want to maintain them, you can upgrade them from Windows Server 2016 to 2019, or upgrade a Linux kernel, So those are things that are high value and more sensitive. But in terms of things like patching, we can do that. Or if you decide I need to back up my servers that are in the cloud because you still need to back up data, even if it's in the cloud, I want you guys to take care of that for me and ensure that the backups, again, because we're 24/7, if you can imagine, let's say on a Friday night, your backup at midnight failed and nobody knows that until you walk in on a Monday morning. And then you're scrambling to fix things that may have gone wrong. Whereas with us, we know it's happened because we're there monitoring it 24/7. If the backup fails, we can reinitiate it. We can contact you to say, Mr. Customer, here's what happened. What would you like us to do? Because we're really an extension of that team, right? We're never a replacement of the IT team. We're an extension of it. So we still work for that customer. We work on their schedule. For example, when it comes to patching, we don't tell the customer we're patching your server today at this time. We tell them there's a patch available we need to do for X reason. We tell them how we'll do it, and we tell them the backup plan. So if things go wrong, how do we back out and make sure you're still stable? But then we ask what time works for them. We're not going to say, well, Sunday at 3 a.m. works for us. They might say, that's my busy time. I have customers on the other side of the world, but that's their prime time when they're on my site. So don't do it Sunday at 3 a.m. So we don't dictate how we do things. You tell us how we do it because we're part of your team, not the other way around.
Got it. Mark, another question. What kind of consultancy services does Cloud Carib offer through their managed services if I have an AWS environment?
Yeah, good question. So we have things around right sizing. So what I mean by that is we can look at your AWS environment and look at how the resources are deployed. Maybe we can consolidate because again, AWS charges per VM and per hour or per minute or per month, depending on how you pay. But sometimes you can reduce your environment. Sometimes you need to expand it. So it may be an issue of performance. So it depends on the customer need. If they decide they want to see if they can scale back pricing, we can look at that. If they decide they want to improve performance, we can look at that. If they decide that they're not sure if they've configured things properly, we'll look at that. If they're configuring a firewall, for example, in AWS, and they can't quite get it to work right, the default for a lot of people in general, when they can't get something to work in terms of a firewall, is they open it up more until things work properly, until data flows, until they can access what they need to access. But that means they may have gone too far. And again, we get busy, we move on to the next task because our bosses need us to do other things, and we don't get back to it to tighten it up. And then that's when bad things happen. So we can take a look holistically at the entire platform and determine what needs to happen so that it's running the most efficiently, most securely, and in my mind, the most important thing is the most resiliently. So if AWS has a failure, your data doesn't magically go to another AWS region and start running again. You need to plan for that. The big giant guys can do that, like the Netflixes of the world that run on Amazon. They have thousands of IT staff. Not all of us have that. Almost nobody has that. But we can still plan for that to make sure it works properly.
Great. Sandy?
Okay, so we're down to the last question on our list. And we're back to the topic of security. So if a company migrates the cloud with Cloud Carib, who has access to data? Is it encrypted, and can our engineers access the data and manipulate it?
Very good question. And I mentioned earlier, we have two models of management with Cloud Carib. So if you decide that I'm going to manage my environment, I just want Cloud Carib to provide me the underlying infrastructure so I can build my servers on, you have full control. We don't have access to your servers. We can't log in. We can't do anything. It also means we can't help you as much. But again, that's your choice as a customer. So in that case, we have no access to your data. And further than that, you can also encrypt your data if you choose to. And customers will do that at times, but sometimes they decide not to encrypt your data because when that happens, the customer is solely responsible for the keys to decrypt that data. And if they lose that key, we cannot help them and they can't help themselves. So they decide against that in most cases because it can be a good thing, but it can be a dangerous thing. On the other side, customers again might say, we need you to patch our servers. We need you to back up our servers. We want you to help us with that aspect. In that case, it's a shared model of responsibility. We have our login, you have your login, everything is logged so that if we go in at 3 a.m. and break something, you know that it was us because you can check your logs. That doesn't happen, but theoretically, if it happens, you know. So there's a shared responsibility matrix or model where we both have access to the servers, but that's something that we don't just take. That's something you must give us. You decide, we want you to do this patching. So again, by needing to patch something, that means we have a tool that logs in as an administrator typically to perform a patching method. Or you might say, please log into my server to see why it's running slowly. So in those cases, we have access. It can be revoked when you don't want us to have it. It can be given when you need it. But it's up to the customer and their comfort level with us. But they can totally have an environment in our cloud with us having no access to it.
Mark, can I ask you about backup? Because I find that a lot of companies that feel maybe it's usually the non-IT decision makers often are not quite ready to move to the cloud, but they are ready for backup.
Yeah.
So backup is kind of like a stepping stone to cloud migration. The way I like to explain it is that you have your backup tool, we recommend Veeam, and then you can just back up to another location that's safe, that's out of the hurricane zone or out of a flood zone. Back up daily, and then we save 30 days of your information, your data, 30 restore points. You can call us anytime if you lose an email or lose a document. And if a disaster happens, you replace your servers, get a new operating system, and we send it down back to you using our own bandwidth. Is that a correct explanation? Am I explaining it correctly?
You are. So, and Veeam is an excellent product we use widely. But that is correct. You would take your data. Let's say you want to be on premise, as you said, you're not quite ready to go to the cloud, but you need to provide some level of protection for your data. If there's fires, if there's floods, anything, the cleaners can unplug a server to plug in a vacuum. I've seen it happen. It's not a fiction. It can happen. But by having a good backup offsite, you've eliminated a few things, right? You've eliminated the local issue where if your data is backed up in the same building as your primary data, that's not a good thing because if something happens to the building, both sets of data are affected. So we do backups off-site to one of our data centers. Typically, if someone's in the hurricane zone, they want to go into a non-hurricane zone area. We have data centers in Panama and Ecuador for that. And if you're not in the hurricane zone, you don't want to put your data in a hurricane zone. I think Guyana is safe in that respect. But that is a good stepping stone to cloud because it lets people see exactly how it works. They're moving the data off-site, which is the first step. And I'll say that in terms of your backup data, it's encrypted in flight, meaning moving between your servers and our servers. It's encrypted. And at rest, it can also be encrypted. But you're right, it's 30 days at a minimum. Customers may have different requirements legislatively or just culturally. They might want to have 60 days or a year of data stored. So that's something to consider as well. But 30 days is our minimum. So that, again, and it's not a matter of a disaster. Like backups are not always just to fix disasters. It may be that your CEO deleted a file and didn't realize he deleted it for 10 days or 15 days. And when he says, I need that file back, he needs it back. So you can go back, in this case, 15 days, pull that file directly and restore it. And you can either call us to do that for you from a restore perspective, or you can do it yourself through the tools you provide.
Mark, we have another question from the group. What are the advantages of migrating my Active Directory to Cloud Carib rather than migrating to Azure?
So the difference with that is, again, as a managed services provider, we can help tweak and manage that environment. Whereas if you're just looking for infrastructure, if you're putting your AD in Azure, you're saying to the US government, here's my data, here's my user login. It may or may not matter to you, but if it does, you don't want to do that. Other than that, if you need any sort of assistance in the future, AWS will not do that, or Azure won't do that, we will. We're also, generally speaking, AD is used for authentication. Generally speaking, we're physically closer, and that may be milliseconds. It may not be relevant, But if it ever is an issue, that's something we can help with. We can help with the design of the AD infrastructure, for example, versus just, with Azure is like, here's the server, do what you need to do.
Can I ask a little bit about data loss? Data loss comes up a lot. Google and Amazon lost, I think, each 5 million records of their customers last year. We have service level agreements in place that say that we will not lose your data. We will protect your data. It's a 99% service level agreement. We've never gone below it in 10 years. Can you address that? Because I don't think people are aware how often data is lost from Azure, Google, and the fact that they have it built into their contract to say we don't have to make sure your data is not lost, right?
That's the biggest thing, that they explicitly say your data is not our problem. That's in the contract. So, and a lot of people think, well, I don't use the cloud, but I'm going to use Office 365. I'll give you an example there. So that means they have their email, maybe SharePoint, maybe OneDrive. They may have terabytes of data with Microsoft, and they're under the false assumption that Microsoft's backing up my email, they're backing up my SharePoint. The reality is they're not only not doing that, they're telling you it's not our problem if you lose data. That's why you need to still back up. Even if you've decided to go to an Office 365 type platform, your responsibility doesn't go away in terms of protecting that data. If you lose an email, if you lose many emails, if a malicious employee deletes their mailbox on the way out the door, if you let them go, you can't get that data back. Microsoft won't help you get that data back. You're on your own. So if you're backing it up, that's great. If you're not, they have no ability to help you, let alone any legal obligation to help you. And we're the opposite of that.
And speaking of data sovereignty, Office always comes on Azure. So we have customers that just move Office to us because they don't want the United States government seeing their emails in SharePoint. So I thought that was a good point to make, correct?
Correct. We can build essentially local copies of Office 365 in terms of email, so Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Office Online. We can build essentially a scaled down version of Office 365 that runs locally in your environment or in a data center that's local. Because again, if you're in Office 365 with Azure, you're subject to Patriot Act or what's now called the Cloud Act or Fisa Warrants, and email is a treasure trove of data for most companies.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we have, and Sandy, we have 2 minutes left, so it looks like we're ending on time. Can you just end with, it feels like a corny question because you always see people Googling this, but if you had to tell someone why they should go to the cloud from being on premise, what would you say are, let's say, the top 5 benefits, in your opinion?
Top 5 benefits? Don't put me on the spot or anything, Jeff.
Okay, no number. There's
a lot of benefits. One of them is obviously scalability. So I mentioned it earlier. So you need to, if you want to react, if your business wants to react as quickly as your customers want you to react, you need to be able to scale. And that's a sign of a successful business. And hopefully we all experience that, where you need more and more and more resources to get the job done. And you don't want to wait weeks for that or months. You want to get it as quickly as possible. That's number one, is scalability. The other thing is resiliency. So we all think that, well, I'm not a big player. I don't have billions of dollars. I can't scale out like an Amazon or like an Azure or like a Netflix, like I mentioned. But the reality is we don't need to spend that kind of money to achieve the same sorts of results. We just to plan for it and get the right resources in place. And what that means is to do it yourself. Again, you can't, not every company can go and hire a database expert or a storage expert or a networking expert or a VMware expert in this case. Companies like us have done that. We've got, and just this example, Cloud Carib, we have people from all over the world that are working for Cloud Carib to deliver these services to our customers. And I want to address a small fallacy that sometimes people think, in the Caribbean, there is a lack of talent. That's not the case. It's not true at all. I know that because we are a Caribbean company and the vast majority of our staff, our technical staff, are from around the region. I mean, our VMware person, our VMware architect is a dual VCAP, and that's a VMware. It's a very high-end VMware certification, and he's from Guyana, and he works for us full-time as our VMware architect. We have our database engineer. We found him working for Oracle in Egypt. And now he works, and these people all work for us in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas. They made the commitment, they moved, but they're delivering those services to customers who just can't feasibly, assemble the same group of people, do the same things. So that's the big advantage. That's of the cloud or someone like us, specifically a managed cloud provider, not just a infrastructure provider. Amazon has amazing engineers. You just can't talk to them. So what is the point for you? There's nothing. They're helping Amazon, they're not helping you. Whereas our people are hired to help our customers.
Perfect.
I don't know if that's 5, but there's a few other.
I think that was more than 5, Mark. We're very
Okay.
happy with that. Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Let's end it here. I want to recognize 2 of our partners that came online today, Rennie and Ryan from Data Technology, our new partner in Guyana, and also Roger Lake from Elite Consulting, who covers the rest of the Caribbean for his company. We're glad to see you. We're glad to see everyone that joined us today. If you have any questions about Cloud Carib, you would like a quote, you would like more information, you would like to talk to an engineer, and there is my information. We'd be happy to talk to you. Sandy, thank you very much for posing the questions. And Mark, thank you for answering them. This was a great webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day.
You too.